The last time, in my last video, I said that probably the next time you saw my airplane, it would be glued together. Well, I was wrong. I came across some issues, and let me show you what those issues are and how I resolved them. The way that I discovered them was by basically doing what I've done right here, is that put together the plane, but just hold the fuselage together with some rubber bands, and then test things out. And in doing that, I discovered that my flaps, rather than both going down, one went up and one went down, and needed to have a servo reverser. The reason for that is one motor is facing one way and the other motor is facing the opposite way. So when they get the same servo signal, because they are coming off the Y cable, one's going to go up and one's going to go down. So there were a couple ways that I could solve that. I could buy an electronic servo reverser, which simply takes the signal and alters it so that it reverses it. Another way would be to take apart the servo motor and rewire the motor and the potentiometer so it would have the same basic effect. Or, as I chose to do, because I didn't have a local hobby shop where I could buy a servo reverser, actually there's 4 ways. The third way that I considered was simply make my own servo reverser. Get an inexpensive pick, program it to take the input, and then reverse it. The fourth way, and the way I chose to do it, was simply to take the motor that was backwards and move it to the other side, and I'll show you that in a moment. So in testing it, like I said, what I did is I put it together as pretty much see it. I don't have the carbon fiber rod there. I'm not trying to put this together in any final form, but just primarily for testing purposes. So let me go ahead. I got my transmitter on. Go ahead and plug in the battery here. And you'll see that my ailerons behave as they should. That my flaps now both go down with a single signal. If you watch towards the rear, you'll see my rudder control, and you'll also see my elevator controls working. I also have my prop and motor working. What I came across with that too was a problem. My prop was hitting. What I should have done in assembling this before gluing in the motor and the motor mount was actually have the prop on the motor, so that when I was aligning it to make sure that it would actually clear the fuselage. Mine was hitting a little bit. There's actually a few marks. Now, I didn't discover it by actually turning the prop on electrically. I moved it by hand, discovered that it was out of line. So I'll show you once I take apart the fuselage how I resolve that. But I'm going to go ahead and show you that the prop is working. So I've got all the components pretty well under control and working. So I'm going to go ahead and take apart this fuselage so I can show you some of the things that I did. I'm going to start by taking the wing off. And this is the wing that I altered, yes. So zoom in a little bit here so you can see. So here's the motor that controls the flap. It originally was in this location. I pulled it out. The glue holds quite well. I pulled it out, cut an opening over here for that motor, flipped it, and then glued it back into place. So that's how I took care of the servo reverser. One of the issues is my cable shortened up because I'm moving it from here to here. I had to pull more of the cable through. Still will work, but it's going to make it a little bit more difficult to connect. You'll also see that I've got some heat shrink on this cable. What I ended up doing here was that this was a very long cable. This probably had at least another foot of cable, and that was going to make it more difficult to stuff inside the fuselage when I assembled it. So what I did is I cut it apart, resoldered it together, and put heat shrink over it. So I think that's going to work. And I could access it, but a connector that's in here that I showed in an earlier video, but I couldn't easily access that without cutting things apart. So I thought this was the best solution. If for some reason that doesn't work, then maybe I will have to tear into that. So that was the wing that I ended up modifying. I'm going to go ahead and take off the other wing. No changes were made to this wing. What you will see is that I've labeled all of my connectors. And I'm going to zoom in here in just a moment so you can see. So all of my cables I've labeled, whether they be ailerons, flaps, elevator, rudder, so that I know, and I've labeled both ends of them. So where they come together right now into my receiver, all of these ends are also labeled. So I'm pretty well set there. Just give me a moment, I'm going to go ahead and take off these rubber bands and open up the fuselage so you can see what changes I've made in there. So I've decided on my final layout internally. What I've done is I've taken my flaps and my aileron servo cable extension, moved those to this upper section. I wasn't planning on using it anyway. Some people do put their ESC up in here, but I didn't want mine that close to my compass and other electronics. So this was going to be unused space. So I've used those two cables. I also brought my throttle cable up through there as well. I still have my power manager in this lower section. I've hot glued that in place. So I'm happy with this. I think this is going to work pretty well. I increased some of the openings to allow for a little bit better airflow. I was concerned about that before, and I've opened it up even more. I've removed the piece of foam that originally was glued onto the side that I was using to keep my chassis, my electronics chassis, from shifting from side to side. But that was causing me problems in getting that into the actual fuselage. So I've removed those and put those onto the actual chassis itself. It's still going to be tight. That's going to be an issue. I'm still considering maybe removing some more foam, maybe this piece, to possibly get this battery more towards the rear of the plane. So that's a possibility. Let me go ahead and show you the chassis. I made two modifications to it. I've removed the top platform so you can see some of those changes. Let me just get that focused in there. So what you'll see are these two little fingers here. These are leftover servo horns that I wasn't using. I cut off part of the end. I used the screws that came with the servo motor, drilled two holes into this platform, and screwed them in there. What this will do is I can slide these. I'll probably use a screwdriver in actual use, but I can slide these. These will fit right underneath the foam that extends down through that canopy opening. So this seems like it's going to work pretty well. I think these will be rugged enough. I didn't want to rely on one. I like to double up, sort of a safety. I got a lot of money invested in this. I don't want it falling out, or if I crash, it being catapulted out and hit something. So this was one of the changes that I made. The other one, as I mentioned, was adding the styrofoam from the fuselage onto the actual side of the chassis. So this will still slide in, still keep it from moving from side to side, but now I can more easily drop it into place. So I think this is going to work out pretty well. So my next step is to actually glue the fuselage together, and hopefully that goes well. I don't encounter any other problems, but whatever I run into, I will keep you up to date with my videos. So again, thank you very much for watching.